We've invited Dr. James Pratt, a criminal justice instructor, Albany State University, to discuss all of this with us. Good morning to you, and thank you once again for starting your day with us. Let's talk about the jurors first. We've been reporting they squirmed. They looked away. You might understand that. Graphic evidence being presented here by the crime scene investigator. When jurors have that kind of reaction that is visible, even perhaps audible, as there were gasps in the courtroom, who does that help? Who does that hurt?
I mean, I think it helps everyone understand the nature of humanity, that this is a real live person that has lost their life. This is somebody's brother, somebody's child, and it brings it home for the people that are watching. So it hurts the families, of course. It hurts Black men like myself and others that could be victims like this as well. So I think it helps the case. I think it kind of helps us all see the image of someone that maybe compel us to change how we think about the law, how we think about race, and how we think about justice in our communities.
And what about duty and responsibility? We're looking at the first officer to respond on the scene. He testified. He said he did not render any kind of aid to Ahmaud Arbery, who he believed was struggling to take his last breaths when he got there. And he said the reason why was because he needed to watch his back. He didn't know what was going on. But then he later didn't seem to have any problem with one of the defendants, Mr. Bryan, who was on the scene. How do we reconcile that, the legal obligation, if any, to render that aid?
I mean, I think that's wholly disappointing. And when I heard that, it broke my heart because it speaks to a lack of training and a lack of recognition of, like you mentioned, a duty to assist someone. Again, he went to the side. He chose a side just like Mr. Bryan, instead of leaning into Mr. Arbery, whose life potentially could have been saved. We don't know. All we know that this man has lost his life, and it speaks to a need to deal with what are our immediate response teams outside of the police, and how do we reckon with situations as traumatic and dramatic as this.
At one point, it's actually the whole thing in this trial. Travis McMichael's claim that he shot Ahmaud in self-defense in an attempt to make that citizen's arrest. The police officer was asked time and time again if arrest, citizen's arrest, any of that was stated, and it wasn't. So how can the defendants go about proving that they were in pursuit of who they believed to be a criminal?
I think they would have to illustrate that there is a reasonable suspicion that Mr. Arbery stole something, or that Mr. Arbery stole something in the first place. And I don't believe that that's clear. So they have to do some big heavy lifting in order to demonstrate that Mr. Arbery could be arrested. And I think, again, going back to the question of duty, I think that speaks to a duty of the Bryans and McMichaels to understand the law. At the end of the day, it looks like Mr. Arbery should have been the one committing a citizen's arrest, because he was being stalked, he was being followed, and he was being pursued, and it led to the use of deadly force.
I want to talk about shoddy police work, or at least the implication, right? We know what happened to even get to this point where there was going to be no prosecution. So we can put it there first, prosecutors, but police on the scene too, because there seems to be this inference already, if not outwardly stated, that perhaps Ahmaud Arbery was dangerous, that he wasn't just jogging, that he may have even had a weapon, not uttered, but police did not search the route that Ahmaud Arbery was jogging. So how will that play out, that inference in front of this jury?
I think it speaks to a consistent use of bias, leaning into those stereotypes and bias where we're not assumed as innocent, we're assumed as guilty, and we have to do the work. And that just speaks to how the larger apparatus of the state kind of leans into these racial biases, which implies that we have to reckon with the legacy of racism, not only in our institutions, but in the body of the law, in our legal practices, in our police practices, and in our investigatory practices. So we need a comprehensive overhaul when it comes to doling out justice and ensuring safety, not just for some people, not just for homeowners, but for joggers, Black men that are already perceived as more violent and more dangerous and get disproportionately punished, and a whole litany of things that have extended way back for centuries in this particular nation.
Yeah, and once again, as you said, the one who was assumed to be safe for this patrol officer, Minshew, was one of the men who's now charged with this horrific killing. But let's stick with Officer Minshew because William Bryan told him several times he blocked or cornered Ahmaud Arbery in this pursuit with his truck. Why is that so significant?
Because it sounds like you're trapping an animal. A lot of times there's some research by another field golf, that studies policing that talks about the language that officers and others use to describe black men, that they're bigger, that they look like a gorilla, they look like an animal. And so this speaks to a consistent use of language, not only here in Georgia, but in places like California and beyond. And so I think, again, it speaks to not only just the Bryant and McMichael or the McMichaels and Bryant, but it speaks to Minshew and other officers and how themselves may have some implicit or specific biases that make them do their job just a little differently based on the race and sometimes the gender and class of the people who need their help in reality, as opposed to others that are committing the crime.
Yeah, and then we only have a little bit of time left, but I want to talk about body language because even as the world is watching and we've waited all these days, Ahmaud Arbery's mother talked about 600 plus days to even get to court, the demeanor, Officer Minshew, the demeanor of the defendants taking notes or just looking, as we can't unsee the horrific injuries that just as a human being to witness is horrific. What do you make of the body language? That officer looked like he could have been anywhere else, but he had to be here, so I guess he'll answer the questions.
Yeah, detachment allows for that emotional kind of standing back, right? I think that's the importance of showing the images of his body, really speaking to who Ahmaud Arbery was, and allowing the jury to make a connection that, again, this is somebody's life that has been lost due to negligence and an intent to hunt down a young black man. So I think the body language speaks a lot. It'll be interesting seeing the rest of this trial and how this transforms. And then when sentencing happens, if these men are prosecuted and are proven to be guilty, we'll see what that body language continues to look like moving forward.
Yeah, Dr. Pratt, it seems all the more important we're out of time that Ahmaud Arbery's mother is sitting in that courtroom as that constant reminder, this was my son. Thank you, Dr. Pratt. We appreciate you. We rely on you and will continue to do so today. The trial is set to begin at 9 a.m., so we appreciate you sticking around. Thank you.